The blood on her hands had long since dried by the time she stumbled into the dusty town of Redemption, Texas. But Sarah Mitchell could still feel its phantom wetness against her palms as she gripped the reins of her stolen horse. It was late August in 1878, and the sun beat down mercilessly on the parched earth, turning the main street into a ribbon of pale dust that clung to her torn calico dress and matted hair. She had been riding for 3 days straight, stopping only when exhaustion threatened to pull her from the saddle. And now, as she guided the mare past the weathered storefronts and curious stares of townsfolk, all she could think about was water, rest, and whether the law had already sent word ahead about what she had done. The town was smaller than she had hoped, consisting of little more than a single main thoroughfare lined with the usual establishments: a general store, a saloon, a livery stable, and what appeared to be a modest boarding house with faded green shutters. Sarah's throat burned with thirst, but she forced herself to maintain composure as she dismounted in front of the stable, her legs nearly buckling beneath her when her boots hit the ground. The smell of hay and horse sweat enveloped her as a young, stable hand emerged from the shadows, eyeing her with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Need a stall for your mare, miss?" he asked, his voice cracking with adolescence. Sarah nodded, unable to trust her voice just yet. She fumbled in the pocket of her dress, producing a few crumpled bills, money she had taken from the man's wallet after he had fallen, after she had grabbed the fire poker and swung it with every ounce of strength she possessed. The memory made her hands shake as she passed the money to the boy. "She needs water and feed," Sarah managed to rasp out. "Good feed, she has earned it." The boy took the money and reached for the reins, but paused when he got a closer look at Sarah's face. Whatever he saw there, the hollowed-out fear, the exhaustion, the desperate edge of someone running from something, made him swallow hard and simply nod. "Yes, miss, I will take good care of her." Sarah turned away before he could ask questions, her legs carrying her on instinct alone toward the boarding house. Each step felt like moving through honey, her body finally registering the full weight of what she had endured over the past 72 hours. She had killed a man. She had taken a life. The words repeated in her mind like a prayer or a curse, impossible to escape. The boarding house proprietor was a severe-looking woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked Sarah up and down with the practiced eye of someone who had seen plenty of trouble pass through her doors and had learned to spot it on sight. "I need a room," Sarah said, her voice steadier now. "Just for a few nights while I figure out where I am heading next." The woman's lips pressed into a thin line. "You got money." Sarah produced more of the bills, laying them on the counter between them. The woman's expression did not change, but she swept the money into her apron pocket and produced a key from a board behind her. "Room 3 upstairs. Breakfast is at 7, dinner at 6. No men allowed upstairs, no drinking in the rooms, and no trouble. You bring trouble to my house and you will find yourself back on the street before you can blink. We clear." "Crystal clear, ma'am," Sarah replied, taking the key with fingers that still trembled slightly. "There is a bathhouse next door," the woman added, her tone softening just a fraction. "You look like you could use it. Tell Martha I sent you, she will fix you up proper." Sarah clutched the key and nodded her thanks, but before she could turn toward the stairs, the woman spoke again. "Whatever you are running from, I hope it was worth it." The words stopped Sarah in her tracks, and for a moment she considered simply walking up those stairs without responding. But something in the woman's voice, not judgment but a kind of weary understanding, made her turn back. "It was survival," Sarah said quietly. "Nothing more, nothing less." The woman held her gaze for a long moment, then gave a single curt nod. "Then I reckon that is worth plenty." After depositing her meager belongings in the small but clean room upstairs, Sarah made her way to the bathhouse, where Martha, a round, cheerful woman who asked no questions, provided hot water, soap that smelled of lavender, and a clean towel. Sarah sank into the copper tub and scrubbed her skin until it was pink and raw, trying to wash away not just the trail dust but the memory of that night, the feeling of the poker connecting with skull, the sound that had followed, and the way Marcus Thornton had looked at her in that final moment before he fell. Marcus Thornton had been her employer, the owner of a large ranch outside of San Antonio, where Sarah had worked as a housekeeper for nearly 2 years. He had been a widower, respected in the community, a man who sat in the front pew of the church every Sunday and contributed generously to local charities. He had also been a monster behind closed doors. It had started small, comments about her appearance that made her skin crawl, his hand lingering too long when he passed her something, the way he watched her when he thought she was not looking. Sarah had needed the job desperately. Her parents had died of fever the previous winter, leaving her alone with debts to pay and nowhere else to turn. She had ignored the signs, told herself she was imagining things, that a man of his standing would never actually cross that line. She had been wrong. That final night, he had cornered her in the library after she had finished her evening duties. He had been drinking. She could smell the whiskey on his breath as he backed her against the bookshelf, his hands grabbing at her dress, his voice low and threatening as he told her that she should be grateful for his attention, that no one would believe her if she said anything, that she was nothing but an orphan girl with no family and no prospects. Sarah had fought. God, how she had fought. She had scratched and kicked and screamed, but he was bigger and stronger, and his hands were tearing at her clothes when her flailing arm had connected with something heavy on the nearby table. The fire poker. She had swung it without thinking, pure survival instinct taking over, and it had connected with the side of his head with a sickening crack that would haunt her for the rest of her days. He had stumbled backward, shock and rage distorting his features, and then he had lunged at her again. The second blow had been harder, more desperate, and when he fell this time, he did not get back up. Sarah had stood there, poker in hand, watching the blood pool beneath his head, her mind unable to process what had just happened. Then survival had kicked in again. She had grabbed what money she could find, taken his horse from the stable, and ridden into the night, knowing that no jury would believe her word against his reputation, knowing that self-defense meant nothing when you were a poor orphan girl, and the dead man was a pillar of the community. Now, sitting in the cooling bath water in this nowhere town called Redemption, Sarah finally allowed herself to cry. Great, shuddering sobs that shook her entire body, tears mixing with the bath water as she mourned not just for the girl she had been before that night, but for the innocence lost, the life she would never get back, and yes, even for the taking of a human life, monster though he had been. By the time she returned to her room, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed too beautiful for such an ugly world. Sarah collapsed onto the narrow bed and fell into a sleep so deep it was almost like death itself. She woke to the sound of voices outside her window, the morning sun already high in the sky. For a moment, disorientation clouded her mind. Where was she? Then it all came rushing back, and she sat up quickly, heart pounding. The voices were not threatening, just the normal sounds of a town going about its business, but paranoia had become her constant companion. Every stranger could be a lawman. Every set of hoofbeats could be a posse coming to drag her back to San Antonio to face trial and hanging. Sarah forced herself to breathe slowly, to calm the racing of her heart. She had to think clearly now. She needed to decide what came next. Should she stay here for a while, let the trail go cold, or should she keep moving, put as much distance between herself and Texas as possible? The problem was that she was exhausted, bone-deep tired in a way that sleep alone could not fix, and she had precious little money left. She would need to find work, which meant staying in one place long enough to earn trust and wages. The thought of presenting herself as a respectable woman looking for honest work would have been laughable if it was not so necessary. She was respectable, she reminded herself firmly. She had done nothing wrong except defend herself from a man who would have destroyed her. The shame and guilt that threatened to overwhelm her had no place here. She was a survivor, and survivors did what they had to do after dressing in her cleanest dress, a simple brown cotton affair that had seen better days. Sarah made her way downstairs. The dining room was empty except for the proprietor, who introduced herself properly this time as Mrs. Hargrove, and laid out a breakfast of eggs, bacon, and fresh bread that Sarah attacked with the hunger of someone who had been living on jerky and desperation for days. "You got family around these parts?" Mrs. Hargrove asked, refilling Sarah's coffee cup. "No, ma'am," Sarah replied carefully. "I am on my own. My parents passed last winter and I have been looking for a fresh start somewhere new." It was close enough to the truth that it did not feel entirely like a lie. Mrs. Hargrove nodded slowly. "Plenty of folks come through here looking for fresh starts. Redemption has a way of attracting people who need a second chance. You looking for work?" "I am," Sarah said, meeting the older woman's eyes. "I am a good worker. I can clean, cook, sew, and manage a household. I am honest and reliable." "Those are fine qualities," Mrs. Hargrove said. "As it happens, I could use some help around here. My arthritis has been acting up something fierce, and the place is getting to be too much for me to manage alone. Pay would not be much, but you would get room and board included." Interested, relief flooded through Sarah so intensely that she felt dizzy. "Yes, ma'am, very interested, thank you." "Do not thank me yet. I work my help hard, but I work fair. You prove yourself and we will get along just fine." Over the following days, Sarah threw herself into her new position with determined energy. She scrubbed floors until they gleamed, beat rugs until no dust remained, prepared meals that earned grudging compliments from Mrs. Hargrove, and slowly began to feel like perhaps she could build something resembling a normal life here in Redemption. The other boarders were a rotating cast of characters: a traveling salesman, a widow passing through to visit family, a young couple heading west to try their luck in California. And Sarah kept her interactions with them polite but brief, always fearful that too much conversation might lead to dangerous questions. It was on her 8th day in Redemption that she first saw the cowboy who would change everything. She was hanging laundry in the small yard behind the boarding house, the hot sun beating down on her shoulders, when she heard the sound of hoofbeats and male voices coming from the direction of the livery stable. Curious despite herself, Sarah glanced over the fence and saw a group of men dismounting from their horses, all dust-covered and trail-worn. They had the look of ranch hands, probably stopping in town for supplies and a drink before heading back out to wherever they worked. One man, however, caught and held her attention. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled out his work shirt in a way that suggested strength earned through hard labor rather than idle posturing. His hat was pushed back on his head, revealing dark hair that needed a cut and a face that was all strong lines and angles, weathered by sun and wind but undeniably handsome. He moved with an easy confidence as he helped his companions unload their gear, and when he laughed at something one of them said, the sound carried across the distance and did something strange to Sarah's chest. She realized she was staring and quickly turned back to her laundry, cheeks burning. The last thing she needed was to develop some foolish attraction to a stranger. She was here to disappear, to build a quiet life where no one looked at her too closely. Romance, if such a thing even existed outside of dime novels, was not part of that plan, but fate, it seemed, had other ideas. That evening, Sarah was serving dinner to the boarders when Mrs. Hargrove mentioned that they would be having some regular guests for the next few weeks. "The Barham Ranch is doing their annual drive," the older woman explained as Sarah set down plates of pot roast and potatoes. "They always bring their cattle through here on the way to market, and some of the hands stay with me rather than camp out the whole time. Good men, all of them. Known William Morrison, the foreman, for near about 20 years. His boys are respectful and pay on time, which is more than I can say for some." Sarah's stomach tightened with anxiety. More people meant more chances for her past to catch up with her, more opportunities for someone to recognize her or ask uncomfortable questions. But she simply nodded and continued serving, reminding herself that ranch hands from a local outfit were unlikely to have any connection to San Antonio society or the death of Marcus Thornton. The Bar M men arrived the following afternoon, 3 of them, including William Morrison, a grizzled man in his 50s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. The other 2 were younger, probably in their 20s, and introduced themselves as Tommy Blake and Jack Donovan. Jack was the man Sarah had seen in the livery yard, and up close, he was even more striking than he had been from a distance. He had eyes the color of a summer sky and a smile that seemed to come easy, though there was something thoughtful in his gaze that suggested depths beneath the easygoing exterior. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Mitchell," he said when Mrs. Hargrove introduced them, removing his hat politely. "Mrs. Hargrove did not mention she had hired help. You must be working miracles around here because this place looks better than I have ever seen it." "Just doing my job, Mr. Donovan," Sarah replied, keeping her voice neutral even as she felt color rise in her cheeks. "Call me Jack." "Mr. Donovan makes me sound like my father, and I am not near ready for that yet." Over the following days, the presence of the Bar M men added new rhythms to the boarding house routine. They would leave before dawn to work the herd, return in the evening tired and hungry, and fill the dining room with easy conversation and occasional laughter. Sarah did her best to remain in the background, serving meals and cleaning up afterward, but she found herself increasingly aware of Jack Donovan's presence. He was unfailingly polite, always thanking her for the food and offering to help clear plates despite her protests that it was not necessary. He had a way of drawing people into conversation that seemed effortless, and she would sometimes find herself lingering in the dining room longer than necessary, listening to the men swap stories about cattle, horses, and life on the range. Jack spoke about the work with genuine affection, clearly someone who loved the open spaces and the physical challenges of ranch life. There was an honesty to him that Sarah found both refreshing and terrifying, because it made her acutely aware of her own deceptions. It was on a Thursday evening, while Sarah was washing dishes in the kitchen, that Jack appeared in the doorway with a stack of plates. "Thought I would save you a trip," he said, setting them on the counter beside her. "That is kind of you, but not necessary," Sarah said, her hands continuing to scrub without pause. "You work hard all day, you should rest." "Washing a few dishes is not exactly hard labor," Jack replied with a smile. "Besides, my mama would tan my hide if she knew I was sitting idle while a lady was working." Despite herself, Sarah felt a small smile tug at her lips. "Your mother sounds formidable." "She was," Jack said, his expression growing soft with memory. "She passed 4 years ago, but I still hear her voice in my head sometimes, reminding me of my manners." "I am sorry for your loss," Sarah said quietly, meaning it. "I lost both my parents last winter to fever." "That is a hard blow," Jack said, his voice full of genuine sympathy. "No siblings?" "No, just me now." They stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the slosh of water and the clink of dishes. Sarah could feel Jack watching her, and the weight of his attention made her nervous in a way she could not quite define. "Can I ask you something, Miss Sarah?" he finally said. Her hands stilled in the water. "You can ask. You seem like someone who is running from something. I do not mean to pry, and you do not have to answer if you do not want to. But I want you to know that redemption is a good place for people who need a fresh start. Folks here do not judge too harshly, and they tend to believe in giving a person the benefit of the doubt." Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. She forced herself to meet his eyes to keep her voice steady. "What makes you think I am running from anything?" "The way you look over your shoulder when you hear horses coming into town," Jack said gently. "The way you get real quiet when conversation turns to where folks are from or what brought them here. The fact that sometimes, when you think no one is watching, you look scared half to death." Sarah pulled her hands from the dishwater and dried them on her apron, her mind racing. She could deny it, laugh it off, make some excuse. But looking at Jack's open, honest face, something in her wanted desperately to tell the truth, or at least part of it. "I am not a criminal," she said carefully. "I have not stolen anything or hurt anyone who did not deserve it, but there are people who might see things differently and I would rather not be found. That is all I can say." Jack nodded slowly, as if he had expected something like this. "That is all I need to know. Like I said, redemption is good for fresh starts. Whatever happened before you got here, it does not have to follow you." "I wish that were true," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It can be if you let it," Jack replied. He picked up a dish towel and began drying the plates she had washed, working beside her in comfortable silence. After that evening, something shifted between them. Sarah found herself looking forward to mealtimes, to the moments when Jack would linger in the kitchen afterward to help with cleanup. They talked about small things: the weather, the cattle drive, the characters that passed through town. But beneath the mundane conversations, Sarah could feel something growing, a connection that both thrilled and terrified her. Jack had a way of making her laugh with his stories about mishaps on the range, like the time Tommy had been chased up a tree by an angry bull, or when William had accidentally roped a skunk instead of a calf. He listened when she talked, really listened. His full attention focused on her in a way that made her feel seen for the first time in longer than she could remember. 2 weeks into the cattle drive, Jack invited her to take a walk after dinner, just a stroll down the main street to enjoy the cooler evening air. Sarah knew she should say no, that getting closer to him was dangerous, but she found herself accepting anyway. They walked slowly, maintaining a respectable distance between them, while the town settled into its evening rhythms around them. The saloon was doing good business, piano music drifting out into the street along with the occasional burst of laughter. Above them, stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky, more stars than Sarah had ever seen in the city. "It is beautiful out here," she said, tilting her head back to take in the vast expanse of sky. "One of the things I love about this life," Jack agreed. "You get to see things most people miss. Sunrises that paint the whole world gold, storms rolling in from miles away, nights so clear you feel like you could reach up and touch heaven itself. You really love it, do not you, the ranch life?" "I do," Jack said simply. "It is hard work, and sometimes it is dangerous, and the pay is not much to write home about, but there is a freedom to it that I would not trade for anything. Every day is different. You have got to be tough and smart and willing to adapt to whatever gets thrown at you. It suits me." "How long have you been working for the Barham?" Sarah asked. "About 5 years now. I started as just a regular hand, but William has been teaching me the business side of things. He is getting older, and his sons did not want to stay in ranching, so he has been grooming me to maybe take over as foreman someday. It is more responsibility than I ever thought I would have, but I am grateful for his faith in me." There was pride in his voice, but not arrogance. Sarah found herself admiring his straightforwardness, the way he seemed comfortable in his own skin and confident about his place in the world. It was so different from her own current existence, built on secrets and fear. They reached the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open land and stood looking out at the darkness. Jack was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. "Can I tell you something, Sarah? And you can tell me if I am speaking out of turn." She nodded, not trusting her voice. "I find myself thinking about you more than I probably should," Jack said, his gaze still fixed on the horizon. "I know we have only known each other a couple of weeks, and I know you have got reasons for being cautious. But I want you to know that when I look at you, I see someone strong and capable and kind. Someone who has been through hard times but did not let them break her. I think you are remarkable, and I wanted you to know that." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. When was the last time someone had said something kind to her, had seen her as anything other than a servant or a victim or a murderer? She swallowed hard, trying to find words. "Jack, I am not who you think I am," she managed. "You do not know what I have done." "Then tell me," he said, turning to face her fully. Whatever it is, Sarah, tell me. And there, standing under the vast Texas sky with this man who had somehow become important to her in such a short time, Sarah made a decision. She was tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of carrying the weight of her secret alone. If he rejected her after hearing the truth, if he turned her into the law or simply walked away in disgust, at least she would know. At least she would have tried to be honest with one person in this new life she was attempting to build. "I killed a man," she said, the words coming out in a rush before she could lose her courage. "Back in San Antonio, I was working as his housekeeper and he tried to hurt me. He was going to force himself on me and I fought back. I hit him with a fire poker and he died, so I ran. I took his money and his horse and I ran because I knew no one would believe my word against his. He was rich and respected and I was nobody. I killed a man who tried to hurt me." The silence that followed felt eternal. Sarah waited for Jack to recoil, to call for the sheriff, to look at her with horror or disgust. But when she finally found the courage to look up at his face, what she saw there was not revulsion but something else entirely. His jaw was tight, his eyes blazing with an emotion she could not quite name. "Then you did right," he said, his voice low and fierce. "You did exactly right, Sarah, you hear me? That man was a predator and you defended yourself. You have nothing to be ashamed of." "I took a life," Sarah whispered, tears now streaming freely down her face. "I killed someone." "You survived," Jack corrected, reaching out to gently take her shoulders. "You survived something terrible and you protected yourself when no one else would. That takes courage, Sarah, real courage." "The law will not see it that way. If they find me, they will hang me." "Then we will make sure they do not find you," Jack said firmly. "You are safe here in Redemption, and I will do everything in my power to keep you that way. I give you my word on that." Sarah searched his face, looking for any sign that he was lying or that his words were empty comfort. But all she saw was conviction and something else, something warm and fierce that made her heart skip in her chest. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you risk anything for me? You barely know me." "Because I know enough," Jack said simply. "And because I think I am falling in love with you, Sarah Mitchell, and that means I stand beside you no matter what." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. No one had ever said such words to her before, had ever looked at her the way Jack was looking at her now. Sarah felt something crack open inside her chest, a wall she had built around her heart crumbling under the weight of his declaration. "You cannot love me," she said weakly. "It has been 2 weeks. "I know what I feel," Jack replied. "Maybe it is crazy, maybe it is too fast, but I stopped lying to myself about it a few days ago. You do not have to say anything back. I just needed you to know where I stand." Sarah reached up with a trembling hand and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble of his jaw, the warmth of his skin. He was real. This moment was real. And for the first time since that horrible night in San Antonio, she allowed herself to feel something other than fear. "I think I might be falling in love with you too," she whispered. "And that terrifies me more than anything." Jack smiled then, a smile so full of joy that it transformed his entire face. He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she were something precious and breakable. And Sarah let herself lean into his strength. Let herself believe for just a moment that maybe, just maybe, she could have this. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms while the stars wheeled overhead and the night sounds of the prairie drifted around them. When they finally pulled apart, Jack kept one of her hands in his, lacing their fingers together. "We should get you back before Mrs. Hargrove sends out a search party," he said with a small laugh. They walked back to the boarding house slowly, neither wanting the evening to end. At the front door, Jack lifted her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, an old-fashioned gesture that made Sarah's heart flutter. "Tomorrow is my day off," he said. "Would you like to spend it with me? We could take a ride out to the river, have a picnic, get away from town for a bit." "I would like that very much," Sarah replied, feeling a smile bloom across her face, the first genuine smile she had worn in weeks. After Jack left to return to the livery where the men were camping with the herd, Sarah made her way upstairs to her small room. She got ready for bed mechanically, her mind replaying every moment of the evening, every word Jack had spoken. He knew the worst thing about her, the secret that had driven her from her old life, and he had not turned away. More than that, he had defended her, validated her actions, made her feel like she was not a monster for having fought back. Sleep was a long time coming that night, but when it finally arrived, it was peaceful for the first time in weeks. The next day dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for the outing Jack had proposed. Sarah woke early and helped Mrs. Hargrove prepare breakfast for the other boarders, her movements quick with anticipation. The older woman noticed her improved mood and raised an eyebrow knowingly but said nothing, for which Sarah was grateful. Jack arrived mid-morning, riding his own horse and leading a gentle bay mare that he said was borrowed from the local stable. "She is calm and easygoing," he assured Sarah as he helped her into the saddle. "Perfect for a leisurely ride." They headed out of town at an easy pace, following a trail that wound through scrub brush and rocky outcroppings. Jack pointed out landmarks along the way, telling stories about the area and occasionally stopping to show her interesting plants or animal tracks. His knowledge of the land was impressive, built from years of working outdoors and paying attention to the world around him. The river, when they reached it, was more of a creek, really, but it was lined with cottonwood trees that provided welcome shade from the relentless sun. The water moved slow and clear over smooth stones, creating a peaceful burbling sound that filled the air. It was beautiful in its simplicity, and Sarah felt some of the tension she had been carrying in her shoulders begin to ease. They dismounted and Jack spread a blanket he had brought in his saddle bags, then produced a simple lunch of bread, cheese, dried apples, and a canteen of cool water. They ate in companionable silence for a while, just enjoying the peace of the place. "Tell me about your life before," Jack said eventually. "Before San Antonio, before everything went wrong, what was it like?" Sarah leaned back on her hands, thinking about how to answer. "Simple, mostly. My father was a clerk, worked for a shipping company. We were not rich, but we were comfortable enough. My mother took in sewing to help make ends meet, and she taught me everything she knew about needlework and running a household. They were good people, kind people. They would have been horrified by what happened to me." "They would have been proud of you for surviving," Jack said firmly. "Maybe," Sarah said. "I like to think so. They always taught me to stand up for myself, to not let anyone make me feel small. I suppose in a way that is what saved me. When Marcus Thornton attacked me, something in my head just said no, not like this, not without a fight." "Tell me more about what happened," Jack said gently. "If you want to, sometimes talking about it helps." So Sarah did. She told him everything about the job, about Thornton's escalating behavior, about that final awful night. She described the library, the smell of leather and old books mixed with whiskey, the sound of her dress tearing, the weight of the fire poker in her hand. She told him about the blood, the stealing of the horse and money, the 3 days of riding with barely any rest, driven by pure terror and adrenaline. Jack listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists on his knees. "I wish I could have been there," he finally said. "I wish I could have protected you from ever having to go through that." "But you could not have been," Sarah said reasonably. "We had not even met yet." "And Jack, I do not need you to protect me. I need you to believe me, to stand beside me. That is worth more than protection." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and nodded slowly. "You are right. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met, Sarah Mitchell. Most folks would have crumbled under what you went through, but you kept going. That is incredible." "I did not feel very strong," Sarah admitted. "Mostly I just felt scared, being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway. That is the very definition of brave," Jack said. He reached over and took her hand. "I meant what I said last night. I am falling in love with you and I want you to stay here in Redemption. I want you to build a life here and I want to be part of that life if you will have me." Sarah felt her breath catch. Jack, you need to understand that the danger might not ever fully go away. Someone could come looking for me. There could be a bounty on my head. Being with me could put you at risk. Then we will face that risk together, Jack said. I am not scared of what might happen, Sarah. The only thing that scares me is the thought of losing you now that I have found you. We have known each other less than 3 weeks, Sarah said, but her protest was weak. I have known ranch hands for years who I trust less than I trust you after 3 weeks, Jack replied. Time is not what matters. What matters is how you feel when you are with someone, whether they make you want to be better, whether you can imagine a future with them. When I look at you, I see my future, clear as day. Sarah felt tears gathering again, but this time they were different, not born of fear or grief, but of something that felt dangerously close to hope. I see it too, she whispered. When I let myself imagine staying here, building something real, you are always part of that picture. But Jack, I am afraid. I am afraid of letting myself want this and then having it all torn away. Life does not come with guarantees, Jack said. Bad things can happen whether we are brave enough to reach for happiness or not. So we might as well reach for it, might as well take the chance on something good. What do you say, Sarah? Will you take a chance on me? She looked at him, at this good man who somehow saw value in her despite everything, who offered not just his heart but his loyalty and his strength. She thought about the alternative, continuing to run, continuing to hide, spending the rest of her life looking over her shoulder and never allowing herself to connect with anyone. That was not living. That was just surviving, and suddenly she wanted so much more than that. Yes, she said, the word coming out strong and clear. Yes, I will take that chance. I will stay and I will build a life here, and I want you to be part of it. The smile that spread across Jack's face was like sunrise, bright and warm and full of promise. He leaned forward, moving slowly enough to give her time to pull away if she wanted, and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of restrained passion. Sarah kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Jack rested his forehead against hers. I am going to do everything in my power to make you happy, he said. I promise you that. Just being with you makes me happy, Sarah replied. That is more than I ever thought I would have again. They spent the rest of the afternoon by the river, talking about everything and nothing, sharing stories and dreams, slowly weaving their lives together. Jack told her about his childhood in Kansas, about how he had come to Texas 5 years ago looking for work and found a home. He talked about his hopes of someday owning his own small ranch, nothing grand, just enough land to run some cattle and horses and build a life. Sarah shared memories of her parents, the good times before the fever had taken them, and her own dreams of having a home again, a place where she belonged and felt safe. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, they reluctantly packed up and headed back to town. Jack kept their horses close together as they rode, their legs occasionally brushing, maintaining a physical connection that neither wanted to break. Over the following weeks, Sarah and Jack spent every available moment together. The cattle drive kept him busy during the days, but evenings and his occasional days off were dedicated to her. They took more rides out to the river, attended a town social where Jack proudly introduced her to other locals, and spent countless hours talking in the boarding house parlor under Mrs. Hargrove's benevolently watchful eye. The older woman had quickly figured out the nature of their relationship and had given Sarah a long, searching look one morning over breakfast. That Donovan boy is serious about you, she had said. I can see it in how he looks at you. You serious about him? I am, Sarah had replied honestly. Good, he is a good man, one of the best. You could do a lot worse. Just make sure you are not using him as a hiding place. That would not be fair to either of you. I am not, Sarah had said firmly. I love him, Mrs. Hargrove, really love him. The woman had nodded, satisfied. Then you have my blessing for what that is worth. As August turned into September, the cattle drive concluded successfully, and the Bar M men prepared to return to the ranch. Jack approached Sarah one evening with a proposal that made her heart race. "Come with me," he said. "The ranch is about a day's ride from here, good land with a solid operation. William has already said he would be happy to have you on as cook for the outfit. The pay is decent, you would have your own cabin, and we would be able to see each other every day. What do you say?" Sarah wanted to say yes immediately, but caution held her back. "Jack, that would put me in one place, make me easier to find if anyone came looking. Is that wise?" "The ranch is remote," Jack explained. "We do not get many strangers passing through, and the crew is loyal. If anyone did come asking questions, they would not get any answers, I promise you that. Besides, William knows your situation. I told him everything." Sarah's eyes widened. "You what?" "I told him," Jack repeated calmly. "Not the details, just that you had trouble in your past and needed a safe place. He is a good man, Sarah, and I trust him completely. He said the same thing I did, that you did what you had to do and that we would stand by you. The whole crew would. That is the kind of men they are." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes for what felt like the 100th time since meeting Jack. The idea that a group of strangers would offer their protection based solely on Jack's word was almost overwhelming. "I do not deserve this kind of loyalty," she whispered. "Yes, you do," Jack said firmly. "You deserve safety and happiness and a chance at a real life. Let us give you that. Come to the ranch with me." So she did. 3 days later, Sarah said her goodbyes to Mrs. Hargrove, who pressed a small package of food into her hands and hugged her tightly. "You take care of yourself, girl," the older woman said gruffly. "And if that cowboy does not treat you right, you come straight back here. You will always have a place with me." "Thank you," Sarah said, meaning it with her whole heart, "for everything. You took a chance on me when you did not have to." "We all need chances," Mrs. Hargrove replied. "Now go on. Your future is waiting." The ride to the Bar M ranch took most of the day, following trails that wound through increasingly rough terrain. As they traveled, the landscape shifted from scrub brush to rolling grassland dotted with oak trees. Jack pointed out boundary markers and landmarks, clearly proud of the operation he was part of. The ranch itself, when they finally arrived in the late afternoon, was more substantial than Sarah had expected. The main house was a solid structure of wood and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Several outbuildings were scattered around it, bunkhouses, a barn, corrals, and a small cabin set slightly apart from the others that Jack indicated would be hers. William Morrison came out to greet them, his weathered face creasing into a smile as he helped Sarah down from her horse. "Welcome to the Bar M, Miss Mitchell," he said warmly. "Jack has told me good things about you, and we are glad to have you here." "Thank you for taking a chance on me, Mr. Morrison," Sarah replied. "Call me William. We do not stand on much ceremony around here. Come on, let me show you to your cabin, and then we will get you settled in properly." The cabin was small but well built, consisting of a single room with a fireplace, a narrow bed, a table and chairs, and several shelves for storage. It was simple but clean, and the window looked out over the grassland stretching away toward distant hills. Sarah loved it immediately. "It is perfect," she said, turning to William with a genuine smile. "Thank you." "Glad you like it," William said. "Now about your duties." "We have got about 15 men working the ranch full-time, plus occasional extra hands during busy seasons. You would be responsible for cooking 3 meals a day, keeping the cookhouse clean and managing food supplies. It is hard work, but Jack tells me you are not afraid of that." "No, sir, I am not," Sarah confirmed. "Good, you start tomorrow morning. Breakfast is at dawn, so you will need to be up before that to get it ready. Tommy will show you where everything is stored and how we do things around here." Over the following days and weeks, Sarah threw herself into her new role with determination. Cooking for 15 hungry ranch hands was vastly different from preparing meals for a handful of boarders, but she adapted quickly. She learned to make massive quantities of biscuits, stew, beans, and beef, to keep the coffee pot constantly full, and to plan menus around what was available and in season. The ranch hands were initially cautious around her, the way men who worked in isolated conditions often were around women, but her good cooking and easy manner won them over quickly. They began to relax in her presence, swapping jokes and stories during meals, occasionally asking her opinion on various matters. Sarah found herself settling into the rhythm of ranch life, learning the patterns of work that governed everything from dawn until dusk. And through it all, there was Jack. He was careful about propriety, not wanting to compromise her reputation, but he found ways to be near her throughout the day. He would help carry water for the cookhouse, would linger after meals to talk, would accompany her on walks in the evening after the work was done. Their relationship deepened with each passing day, built on conversation and shared silences, on small gestures of care and increasing trust. About 2 months after Sarah arrived at the ranch, Jack asked her to take a ride with him to check on some cattle in the north pasture. It was a beautiful October day, the oppressive heat of summer finally breaking into something more comfortable. The grass had turned golden, and the sky stretched endlessly blue above them. They found the cattle without issue and were heading back when Jack suddenly steered his horse off the trail toward a small rise that overlooked the ranch. At the top, he dismounted and helped Sarah down, then stood beside her, looking out over the land. "I have been thinking about the future a lot lately," he said after a moment. "About what I want my life to look like 10, 20 years from now, and every time I try to picture it, you are there." Sarah's heart began to pound in her chest. "Jack, let me finish," he said gently. "Please. I know we have not been together all that long by traditional standards, and I know you have reasons to be cautious about commitments, but Sarah, I love you. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. You are the first thing I think about in the morning and the last thing I think about at night. You make me want to be better, work harder, build something lasting, and I want to build that with you." He turned to face her fully, reaching into his pocket to pull out a small object. When he opened his hand, Sarah saw a ring, simple gold with a small stone that caught the sunlight. "It was my mother's," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "The only thing I have left of her. I know it is not fancy, but it is given with all my love. Sarah Mitchell, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to make you as happy as you have made me these past months?" Sarah looked at the ring, then at Jack's face, and felt something settle into place inside her. This was right. This was what she wanted. Yes, there was still danger, still the possibility that her past would catch up with her, but Jack was right. Life offered no guarantees, and hiding from happiness was no way to live. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Yes, Jack, I will marry you." The joy that blazed across his face was incandescent. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her, and then pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made her knees weak. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and laughing, he spun her around in a circle, whooping with happiness. "You just made me the happiest man in Texas," he declared. "And you have made me happier than I ever thought possible," Sarah replied, holding up her hand to watch the light catch on the simple gold band. "When did you want to do this?" "As soon as possible," Jack said immediately. "But properly, with time to plan if you want that. Whatever kind of wedding you want, we will make it happen." They decided on a small ceremony at the ranch, just the hands and a few friends from Redemption, with William serving as best man and Mrs. Hargrove standing up with Sarah. The local preacher agreed to come out the following month, giving them time to prepare, but not so long that the waiting became unbearable. The wedding day arrived crisp and clear, a perfect November morning with just enough chill in the air to make the sunshine feel welcome. The ceremony took place in front of the main house, with everyone gathered in their best clothes. Sarah wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Hargrove had helped her alter and improve, and Jack wore a new shirt and vest that made him look impossibly handsome. The preacher kept the ceremony short and sweet, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, Jack kissed Sarah with such tenderness that several of the harder cowboys had to turn away and clear their throats gruffly. The celebration that followed was joyful and boisterous, with food and music and dancing that lasted well into the evening. That night, Jack carried Sarah over the threshold of his cabin, larger than hers and now theirs, and made love to her with a reverence that brought tears to her eyes. He was gentle and patient, taking his time to learn what brought her pleasure, and Sarah felt safe in a way she had never expected to feel again. This was not the violence that had driven her from San Antonio. This was love, freely given and joyfully received, and it healed something deep inside her that she had not even realized was broken. In the days and weeks that followed, Sarah settled into married life with a contentment that still surprised her sometimes. She continued her work as ranch cook, now working alongside Jack, who had been promoted to second-in-command under William. They worked hard during the day and came together in the evenings, sharing meals and conversation and plans for their future. As winter set in, bringing occasional cold snaps that had the whole ranch scrambling to protect the cattle, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. The realization came one morning when she found herself unable to stomach the smell of coffee, something that had never bothered her before. She counted back carefully and confirmed her suspicion. She was about 2 months along. She told Jack that evening, watching nervously for his reaction. His face went through a series of expressions, shock, wonder, and then pure joy, before he picked her up and spun her around carefully, laughing and crying at the same time. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "Sarah, we are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" she asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Jack replied, placing a hand gently on her still flat stomach. "This is everything I wanted, you, a family, a life together. It is more than I ever dreamed possible." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter and into the spring. Sarah continued working as long as she could, though the hands increasingly insisted on taking over the heavier tasks despite her protests. Jack was simultaneously thrilled and terrified, reading every book on childbirth he could get his hands on and driving Sarah slightly crazy with his overprotectiveness. In late May of 1879, after a labor that lasted through the night and into the following afternoon, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him William Jacob Donovan, after both William Morrison and Jack's father. He had his father's blue eyes and a head of dark hair, and Jack cried when the midwife placed him in his arms for the first time. "He is perfect," Jack whispered, staring down at his son with awe. "Sarah, look what we made. He is absolutely perfect." Sarah, exhausted but happy, reached out to touch the baby's tiny hand. "He is beautiful, and he has a good name to live up to." "He will," Jack said confidently. "With you as his mother, how could he not turn out wonderful?" Those first months of parenthood were exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Sarah had never been so tired in her life, but watching Jack with their son. The gentle way he held him, the silly songs he sang during late-night diaper changes, the fierce protectiveness in his eyes, made every sleepless night worth it. Young William was a good baby, healthy and alert, and as he grew, he showed signs of having his father's easy temperament. The ranch hands, tough men used to dealing with cattle and horses, became surprisingly soft around the baby, competing to hold him and make him laugh. Life settled into new rhythms. Sarah reduced her cooking duties, focusing more on her own family while training one of the younger hands to take over some of the work. Jack continued to rise in William Morrison's estimation, taking on more responsibilities and proving himself more than capable of handling them. When little William was just over a year old, the past Sarah had been running from finally caught up with them. It was a hot afternoon in June when a stranger rode up to the ranch asking questions. Sarah was in the cabin with the baby when Tommy came to find her, his face serious. "There is a man asking after someone matching your description," he said without preamble. "Says he is a private investigator hired by the Thornton family. William is talking to him now, not giving him anything, but I thought you should know. Sarah's blood ran cold. She clutched William tighter, her mind racing. After more than a year and a half, she had begun to believe that perhaps she really had escaped, that maybe they had stopped looking. She should have known better. "Where is Jack?" she asked, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Out with the herd, but William sent someone to fetch him." "He should be here soon." Sarah nodded, thinking quickly. "Thank you for warning me, Tommy. I need to think about what to do." "Miss Sarah," Tommy said, his usually cheerful face deadly serious. "You should know that every man on this ranch stands with you. Whatever happened before, whatever this investigator thinks he knows, it does not matter to us. You are family now, we protect family." The simple loyalty in his words made Sarah's throat tight with emotion. "Thank you," she managed. "That means more than you know." Jack arrived at a full gallop 20 minutes later, leaping off his horse and bursting into the cabin. His eyes were wild with worry until he saw Sarah and William safe, and then he pulled them both into his arms, holding them tight. "What did the man say?" Sarah asked. "What does he know?" "William is still talking to him," Jack said. "Playing dumb, saying no one matching that description has been through here. But Sarah, he has a photograph, an old one from before, but it looks enough like you that if he shows it around town, someone might make the connection." "What are our options?" Sarah asked, her mind already working through possibilities. Running again would mean giving up everything they had built, but staying might mean prison or worse. "We could claim mistaken identity," Jack suggested. "You have been here over a year, established yourself. People know you, that has to count for something. Or we tell the truth," Sarah said quietly. "The real truth, not whatever story the Thornton family has spread. Self-defense is not murder, Jack." "Not in a just world," Jack agreed. "But we do not always live in a just world, and I am not willing to risk you on the hope that a jury would see reason." They were still discussing options when William knocked on the door. His face was grim when they let him in. "The investigator is not leaving," he reported. "Says he's going to stay in the area, ask around, check the neighboring ranches. He's been paid well by the Thornton family, and they want answers about what happened to Marcus Thornton. They are claiming it was robbery and murder, that valuable items were taken from the house." "I only took what I needed to survive," Sarah said. "Some money and a horse. I was not trying to rob him." "We know that," William said gently. "But the family does not want to believe their precious Marcus could have done what you say he did. Rich people do not like their reputations tarnished." "So what do we do?" Jack asked. William was quiet for a moment, then said, "We could go to the sheriff in redemption. Sheriff Hayes is a good man, fair-minded. If we tell him the truth, the whole truth, before the investigator gets to him, he might be willing to listen. Especially if we bring character witnesses, people who can vouch for you being a good person." "That is a huge risk," Jack protested. "What if he decides to arrest her on the spot?" "What if he does not?" William countered. "Sarah, I have known Hayes for 15 years. He is not the kind of man who arrests first and asks questions later. And the longer we wait, the more suspicious we look." Sarah looked at Jack, then at their son sleeping peacefully in his cradle, oblivious to the danger surrounding them. She thought about the life they had built, the community that had embraced her, the love that had healed her. Was she willing to risk losing all of that by staying silent? "We tell the truth," she decided. "We go to Sheriff Hayes, we tell him everything, and we trust that justice will prevail. I am tired of running, tired of hiding. Whatever happens, at least I will know I tried to do the right thing." Jack looked like he wanted to argue, but after a moment he nodded. "Then we do this together. I go with you and we face whatever comes as a team." The next morning, Sarah and Jack rode into Redemption with William at their side, leaving young William in the care of Mrs. Hargrove, who had come out to the ranch as soon as she heard what was happening. The older woman had hugged Sarah fiercely and told her to have faith. Sheriff Hayes was a man in his 40s with prematurely gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He listened without interrupting as Sarah told her story from beginning to end, laying out every detail of that night with Marcus Thornton, the attack, her defense, and her subsequent flight. Jack held her hand throughout, his presence a solid anchor that kept her voice steady. When she finished, the sheriff sat back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "That is quite a story, Mrs. Donovan," he said finally. "You are aware that there is a warrant out for your arrest." "The Thornton family has been pushing hard for justice, as they call it." "I am aware," Sarah said quietly, "and I am prepared to face whatever consequences there are, but Sheriff, I am telling you the truth. Marcus Thornton attacked me and I defended myself. That is not murder." "No, it is not," Hayes agreed. "But it is going to be your word against the reputation of a dead man who cannot defend himself. That is a hard case to make." "She has witnesses to her character," Jack said. "Everyone who knows her can testify to what kind of person she is." "Character witnesses help, but they were not there that night," Hayes pointed out. He drummed his fingers on his desk, thinking. "Here is what I know. I know Sarah Mitchell Donovan has been living in my jurisdiction for over a year and a half. I know she is married to a respected member of the community, mother to a young child, and by all accounts a hardworking, honest woman. I also know that Marcus Thornton, for all his money and reputation, had rumors swirling around him. Nothing anyone could prove but whispers about how he treated his female staff, about girls who left his employment suddenly without explanation." Sarah's head snapped up. "There were others, whispers," Hayes repeated. "Nothing concrete. But enough to make me think your story has the ring of truth to it." He leaned forward. "Here is what I am going to do. I am going to file a report stating that I have investigated the matter and found evidence supporting a claim of self-defense. I am going to recommend to the district attorney that charges not be filed. Whether he listens is another matter, but I will do what I can." "Thank you," Sarah breathed. "Thank you so much." "Do not thank me yet," Hayes warned. "The Thornton family is not going to like this, and they have money to keep pushing. You may still end up having to go to trial to clear your name fully. But at least this way, you will not be sitting in a jail cell while we sort it out." Over the following weeks, Sheriff Hayes proved as good as his word. He conducted a thorough investigation, interviewing people who had known Marcus Thornton and uncovering several women who, with Hayes's assurances of protection, came forward with their own stories of inappropriate behavior and unwanted advances. Nothing as severe as what Sarah had experienced, but a pattern of behavior that corroborated her account. The district attorney, faced with this evidence and the reality that a jury might not convict, agreed not to pursue charges. The Thornton family, furious but unable to do much without legal backing, eventually withdrew their private investigator and returned to San Antonio. Though they made it clear, they considered the matter far from settled. Sarah found herself briefly famous in the local area as word of the case spread. Some people looked at her with judgment, unable to reconcile the idea of a woman killing a man regardless of circumstances. But far more looked at her with respect, even admiration, for having the courage to defend herself and then to come forward and tell the truth. Life gradually returned to normal. The ranch continued its operations, Sarah continued her work and her duties as wife and mother, and Jack continued to prove himself invaluable to William Morrison. Young William grew from baby to toddler, learning to walk and beginning to talk, filling their cabin with laughter and chaos. 2 years after the incident with the investigator, William Morrison called Jack into his office for a private conversation. The older man was looking more tired than usual, moving slower, and Jack had been increasingly worried about him. "I am getting too old for this," William said without preamble. "My joints ache, my energy is not what it used to be, and I am ready to take a step back. I want you to take over as foreman officially, Jack. Full authority to run the ranch as you see fit, with a substantial raise and a percentage of the profits." "What do you say?" Jack was stunned. "William, I do not know what to say. That is incredibly generous." "You have earned it," William said firmly. "You are the best hand I have ever had, and more importantly, you care about this place and the people who work here. I trust you to do right by the Barham. Jack accepted, and the transition happened smoothly. At 28 years old, he found himself in charge of one of the largest ranches in the region, a responsibility he took seriously. Sarah supported him completely, managing their growing family. She was pregnant again, due in the fall, and continuing to be the heart of the ranch community. Their second child, a daughter they named Rose Elizabeth, was born in October of 1881, 3 weeks early but healthy and strong. She had Sarah's dark hair and Jack's blue eyes, and her brother was immediately besotted with her, insisting on helping with everything from diaper changes to bath time. Life was full and busy and good. Jack and Sarah had built something real together, a family and a home grounded in love and mutual respect. The shadow of Sarah's past had not disappeared entirely. There were still occasional reminders, moments when she would tense at the sight of strangers or have nightmares about that night in San Antonio. But those moments grew fewer and farther between as the years passed. By the time their third child, another son they named Thomas, was born in 1884, Sarah had been living at the Barham for 6 years. She was no longer the frightened, traumatized woman who had fled into the night. She was Sarah Donovan, wife of the foreman, mother of 3, and a respected member of the community. She had survived, and more than that, she had built a life worth surviving for. One evening, when Jack was 33 and Sarah was 31, they stood together on the porch of their now expanded cabin, watching the sun set over the grassland. The children were inside, supposedly getting ready for bed, though the giggles suggested they were doing more playing than preparing. Jack's arm was around Sarah's waist, and she leaned into his solid warmth, content in a way that still sometimes surprised her. "You ever regret it?" Jack asked softly. "Staying here, marrying me, building this life, do you ever wonder what might have happened if you had kept running?" Sarah turned to look at him, this man who had seen her at her lowest and loved her anyway, who had stood beside her through danger and uncertainty, who had given her children and a home and a love she had never thought to experience. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "Running brought me here to you, and that makes everything worth it. You saved me, Jack, in every way a person can be saved." "No," Jack said, tilting her chin up to look into her eyes. "You saved yourself, Sarah. You fought for your life, and you kept fighting for your future. All I did was recognize something extraordinary when I saw it and have the good sense to hold on tight." "We saved each other then," Sarah compromised, rising on her toes to kiss him softly. "And we built something beautiful together." "We did," Jack agreed, "and we are not done yet. There is still so much more to come, watching the children grow, maybe building that little ranch I always dreamed of, growing old together. I cannot wait to see what the future holds." "As long as we face it together," Sarah said. "Always together," Jack promised. Inside the cabin, one of the children called for them, and they turned to head back in hand. The prairie stretched out around them, vast and wild and beautiful, full of possibility. Sarah had come here running from death and had found life instead. Real, vibrant, joyful life with a man who loved her and children who filled her days with purpose and laughter. She had killed a man who tried to hurt her, and in doing so, she had given herself a chance at happiness. Jack had been right that first night when he heard her confession. She had done right. Everything that followed, the fear, the uncertainty, the risk of trusting again, had been worth it for this moment, this life, this love. The Wild West was harsh and unforgiving, a place where justice was not always certain, and survival required strength and determination. But it was also a place where people could reinvent themselves, where the past did not have to define the future, where two damaged souls could find each other and build something lasting. As the years continued to unfold, the Donovan family thrived. Jack's leadership of the Barham Ranch was marked by fair dealing and smart management, earning him the respect of hands and neighboring ranchers alike. Sarah's role expanded beyond cook to unofficial ranch manager, handling accounts and correspondence while raising their growing brood. Young William, Rose, and Thomas were eventually joined by another daughter, Eleanor, born in 1887 when Sarah was 35. The children grew up strong and capable, learning the ways of ranch life from both parents. William, the eldest, showed his father's natural leadership and way with horses. Rose was quieter but fiercely intelligent, often found reading when she should have been doing chores. Thomas had his mother's determination and his father's easy charm, able to talk his way out of trouble as often as he got into it. And Eleanor, the baby, was fearless in a way that both delighted and terrified her parents. The ranch prospered under Jack's guidance. He expanded operations carefully, never overreaching, always mindful of the land and the animals. He treated his hands fairly, paid decent wages, and fostered a loyalty that meant turnover was rare. Men who came to work for the Bar M tended to stay, building their own lives and families in the area. Sarah found healing in the routine of days, in the love of her family, in the community she had become part of. The nightmares that had once plagued her grew infrequent and then rare. She would never forget what had happened. The memory of that night would always be with her, but it no longer defined her. She was more than a victim, more than a survivor. She was a woman who had fought for her life and one who had taken that second chance and built something meaningful with it. When Sarah was 42 and Jack was 44, William Morrison passed away peacefully in his sleep. It was a loss that hit the entire ranch hard, but especially Jack, who had looked up to the older man as a mentor and father figure. They buried him on a hillside overlooking the ranch he had built, and nearly 100 people came to pay their respects to a man who had been fair, honest, and kind throughout his long life. In his will, Morrison left the Bar M Ranch to Jack, a final testament to the trust and affection he had felt for his protege. Jack was overwhelmed by the responsibility and the honor, but Sarah stood beside him as she always had, reminding him that he had been effectively running the ranch for years already, and that Morrison's faith in him was well-founded. They renamed it the Donovan Ranch, though old-timers still called it the Bar M out of habit and affection. Under their ownership, it continued to thrive, becoming known throughout Texas as a well-run operation that treated its people right. The children grew into adulthood, each finding their own path. William, true to his name and nature, stayed on the ranch, learning the business from his father and eventually taking over much of the day-to-day operations. Rose shocked everyone by insisting on attending a teaching college in Austin, returning 3 years later as a certified teacher and immediately starting a school for the ranch children and those from neighboring properties. Thomas, restless and adventurous, spent several years working different ranches across Texas and New Mexico before finally coming home, older and wiser, ready to settle down. He married a local girl and built his own small ranch on Donovan land, raising horses with skill that rivaled his father's. Eleanor, the baby, proved to be a natural with medicine and healing, apprenticing with the local doctor and eventually taking over much of his practice when age forced him to slow down. Through it all, Jack and Sarah remained the steady center around which everything revolved. Their love, tested by fire in those early days, had only grown deeper and stronger with time. They had built not just a successful ranch but a legacy, children and grandchildren who knew the value of hard work, honesty, and standing up for what was right. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Jack arranged a surprise celebration at the ranch. Nearly 200 people came, family, friends, ranch hands past and present, neighbors from miles around. They had transformed the main barn into a grand hall, with tables groaning under the weight of food and a small band providing music for dancing. Sarah, gray now streaking through her dark hair and laugh lines crinkling around her eyes, stood beside her husband and looked out at the gathering with wonder. This was her life. These people, this place, this man beside her. This was what she had found when she stumbled into redemption all those years ago, exhausted and terrified and convinced her life was over. Instead, her life had just been beginning. During a lull in the festivities, Jack pulled Sarah outside where they could have a moment of relative quiet. The November air was cool but not cold, the sky brilliantly clear and full of stars. "Happy anniversary, my love," Jack said, producing a small, wrapped package from his pocket. Sarah carefully unwrapped it to find a simple locket on a delicate chain. Inside were two tiny photographs, one of Jack and Sarah on their wedding day, young and hopeful, and one recent photo of their entire family, 3 generations gathered together. "Jack, it is beautiful," Sarah said, tears gathering in her eyes as they seemed to do more easily these days. "Not as beautiful as you," Jack replied, fastening the chain around her neck. 30 years, Sarah. 30 years of waking up beside you, of building this life together, of watching our children grow and our grandchildren come into the world. They have been the best years of my life." "And mine," Sarah said, touching the locket resting against her chest. "You know, I was just thinking about that first night I told you the truth. Do you remember what you said?" "Then you did right," Jack quoted softly. "And I meant it, Sarah. You did exactly right. You fought for your life, and because you did, we got all of this. Our children, our grandchildren, this ranch, this community. None of it would exist if you had not been strong enough to survive that night and brave enough to trust me with the truth. I was so scared," Sarah remembered. "Scared you would turn away, scared you would see me as a murderer, scared that I was making a mistake by letting anyone get close to me. And yet you told me anyway," Jack said. "That took more courage than most people ever have to show in their entire lives." "You are the bravest person I know, Sarah Donovan." Sarah laughed, a sound full of joy and contentment. "I do not feel very brave. Mostly I just feel grateful. Grateful that I survived, grateful that I found you, grateful for every single day I have gotten to spend as your wife." "Well, if we are being grateful, I have got a lot to be thankful for too," Jack said, pulling her close. "A woman who is strong and beautiful and smart, who gave me children I am proud of, who helped me build something meaningful. You are everything I ever wanted, and a dozen things I did not even know I needed." They stood together in the starlight, 2 people who had found each other against impossible odds, who had built a life together through determination and love, who had taken the broken pieces of a tragedy and forged something beautiful from them. "You think the children know?" Sarah asked. "About what happened before we met, about why I came here." "William knows," Jack said. "I told him a few years back when he was old enough to understand. He had a right to know what his mother survived. The others, I'm not sure. We could tell them if you wanted to." Sarah considered this. For so many years, the story had been a secret, something to hide and protect. But maybe there was value in sharing it, in letting her children know that strength could come from surviving terrible things, that defending yourself was never wrong, that the past did not have to determine the future. "Let us tell them," she decided. "Not tonight, not in the middle of a celebration, but soon. They should know that their mother is not just a rancher's wife who cooks and keeps house. They should know I am a survivor." "They already know you are extraordinary," Jack said. "But yes, let us tell them the whole story. They will be proud of you, Sarah. Just like I have been proud of you every single day since we met." The party continued late into the night, full of laughter and music and the warmth of community. Sarah danced with Jack, with her sons, with grandchildren who insisted grandmother had to dance with them too. She laughed until her sides hurt and hugged people until her arms were tired, and through it all, she felt a peace that came from knowing she was exactly where she was supposed to be. In the following years, the Donovan Ranch continued its steady success. New generations began to take over the work, with grandchildren learning the business alongside their parents. Jack and Sarah, now in their 50s and then their 60s, gradually stepped back from daily operations, though they remained the heart and soul of the place. They took to spending their mornings together on the porch, drinking coffee and watching the sun rise over land that now belonged to their family. They would talk about the day ahead, about their children and grandchildren, about memories from their long life together. And sometimes they would sit in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from decades of knowing someone completely. Sarah did eventually tell their children the full story of how she came to Texas, of Marcus Thornton and that terrible night, of her flight and her fear. They listened with varying degrees of shock and understanding, but all of them ended the conversation by telling her how proud they were of her, how brave she had been, how grateful they were that she had survived to become their mother. Rose, ever the teacher, asked if she could share the story with her students as an example of courage and self-defense. Sarah agreed, and it became part of the local history, a reminder that the West was built not just by strong men but by strong women who refused to be victims. As Sarah entered her 70s, her health began to decline slowly but steadily. Nothing dramatic, just the accumulated wear of a life fully lived, joints that ached, energy that waned, a heart that had beat strong for so many years beginning to tire. Jack, only 2 years older but still robust, became fiercely protective, hovering in a way that might have been annoying if it had not been so clearly motivated by love. On a spring morning in 1905, Sarah woke feeling more tired than usual. She was 73 years old, and Jack was 75. They had been married for 47 years, had raised 4 children, and now had 14 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren. It was a legacy to be proud of. "I think I will stay in bed this morning," she told Jack, who immediately looked concerned. "Should I send for a leaner?" He asked, referring to their doctor-daughter. "No, no," Sarah assured him. "I am just tired. I will rest a bit and be up later." But as the day wore on, it became clear that this was more than simple tiredness. Eleanor was summoned, examined her mother thoroughly, and pulled Jack aside for a quiet conversation that left him pale and shaken. Sarah's heart was failing. There was nothing to be done but keep her comfortable and wait. The family gathered, children and grandchildren coming from near and far to say their goodbyes. Sarah held court from her bed, smiling and joking despite her weakness, telling stories and offering advice and making sure everyone knew how much she loved them. On her last night, with Jack beside her holding her hand as he had for nearly 5 decades, Sarah looked at him with eyes that were still bright despite the weakness of her body. "No regrets," she whispered. "None," Jack agreed, his voice thick with tears he was trying to hold back. "You gave me the best life anyone could have asked for, Sarah. I have loved you from the moment I saw you hanging laundry behind Mrs. Hargrove's boarding house, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "We had such a good life together," Sarah said. "I came here expecting to hide, to disappear, to live in fear forever. But you showed me that I could have so much more. You gave me love and family and a place to belong. You gave me everything." "You gave me everything too," Jack said, bringing her hand to his lips. "My beautiful, brave Sarah. I am so proud of you. Proud of how you survived, proud of how you rebuilt your life, proud of the woman you are and the mother you became and the legacy we created together." "Take care of them," Sarah said, her voice growing fainter. "Our children, our grandchildren, tell them stories about us. Tell them that love is worth fighting for." "I will," Jack promised. "I will tell them every day how much we loved each other and how you were the strongest, most remarkable woman who ever lived." Sarah smiled, a peaceful expression settling over her features. "I see them," she whispered. "My parents, they are here, they are proud of me." "They should be," Jack said, tears now flowing freely. "We all are. Rest now, my love. I will be along when it is my time and we will find each other again." Sarah's eyes drifted closed, her breathing growing shallow and then still. She passed peacefully, surrounded by love, in the home she had helped build, leaving behind a legacy that would endure for generations. Jack lived for 5 more years, continuing to run the ranch with William's help, though his heart was no longer fully in it. He spoke of Sarah constantly, keeping her memory alive through stories and reminiscences. He visited her grave every morning, a simple but beautiful stone marker on the hillside next to William Morrison, and he would sit and tell her about their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, about the ranch, about how much he missed her. On a cold January morning in 1910, Jack did not wake from his sleep. He was 80 years old, and according to a leaner who examined him, his heart had simply stopped, worn out by age and grief and a life fully lived. The family buried him next to Sarah, their graves side by side just as they had been side by side in life. The Donovan Ranch continued under William's leadership, and then his children's, each generation adding to the legacy that Jack and Sarah had built together. The story of how they met, of Sarah's survival and Jack's unwavering support, became family legend, passed down from parents to children to grandchildren. The locket Jack had given Sarah on their 30th anniversary became a family treasure, passed down through the female line, a reminder of a love that had overcome impossible odds. Inside, those two photographs remained, young Jack and Sarah on their wedding day, bright with hope, and the family photo showing what they had built together. Years turned into decades. The Wild West that Sarah had known slowly disappeared, replaced by modernity and progress. The Donovan Ranch adapted and survived, just as Sarah herself had adapted and survived. Roads were paved, automobiles replaced horses, and the frontier that had once seemed endless became settled and tamed. But through all the changes, the story remained. The story of a woman who had killed a man who tried to hurt her, who had fled into the unknown, who had found love and courage and a second chance in the arms of a cowboy who told her she had done right. It was a story of survival and redemption, of love strong enough to overcome fear, of two people who found each other when they needed it most and built something lasting together. In the end, Sarah Mitchell Donovan was remembered not as a woman who killed in self-defense, though that was part of her story. She was remembered as a survivor, a mother, a pillar of her community and the beloved wife of Jack Donovan. She was remembered for her strength, her kindness, her cooking that kept ranch hands well-fed for decades, and her wisdom that guided her children and grandchildren. And Jack Donovan was remembered as a man who saw value where others might have seen only shame, who offered love instead of judgment, who stood by his wife through danger and hardship, and who helped her build a life worth living. Their love story became legend in that part of Texas, the tale of the cowboy and the woman he saved, though everyone who truly knew them understood that they had saved each other. Sarah had given Jack purpose and family and a reason to build something lasting. Jack had given Sarah safety and trust and the space to heal and become whole again. It was a love forged in the harsh reality of the Wild West, tested by fear and strengthened by adversity, and it endured not just through their lifetimes but for generations beyond. Their descendants, scattered across Texas and beyond, carried within them the legacy of that love, the knowledge that strength comes in many forms, that defending yourself is never wrong, that the past does not define the future, and that sometimes the most extraordinary lives come from the most desperate beginnings. The sun sets differently now over what was once the Donovan Ranch, painting the sky in the same oranges and purples that Sarah watched from her porch all those years ago. The land has changed, the buildings updated, the cattle managed with modern techniques that Jack and Sarah could never have imagined. But the heart of what they built remains: family, love, loyalty, and the courage to fight for the life you deserve. And somewhere, in the way the wind whispers through the grass and the stars wheel overhead in their eternal dance, the spirits of Jack and Sarah Donovan rest together, their story complete, their love eternal, their legacy secure. They had lived fully, loved deeply, and left the world better than they found it. What more could anyone ask from a life lived right? The Wild West was unforgiving, but it was also a place where second chances were possible, where the past could be left behind, where a woman running from tragedy could find love with a cowboy who saw her worth. Sarah and Jack proved that sometimes the greatest love stories are not about princes and princesses in castles, but about ordinary people who find extraordinary strength in each other, who face the world together, and who build something beautiful from the ashes of what came before. Their story was one of countless such stories that shaped the American West, tales of survival and redemption, of love found in unexpected places, of people who carved out lives and legacies against impossible odds. But it was also uniquely theirs, a testament to the power of one moment of courage when Sarah confessed her deepest secret, and one moment of grace when Jack replied with words that would echo through generations. "Then you did right." Those 4 words changed everything. They gave Sarah permission to stop running, to stop hiding, to stop hating herself for having survived. They opened the door to healing, to love, to a future she had thought lost forever. And in speaking them, Jack bound himself to her, promising without quite saying it that he would stand beside her no matter what came next. That promise was kept for 47 years, through good times and hard times, through the birth of children and the building of an empire, through threats from the past and triumphs in the present. It was kept until death parted them, and even then, the love that drove it lived on in the family they created and the story they left behind. In the end, Sarah's greatest act of courage was not killing Marcus Thornton in self-defense, though that took tremendous bravery. It was not fleeing into the unknown, though that required desperate strength. It was not even confessing the truth to Jack, though that was terrifying in its own right. Her greatest act of courage was deciding to stay, to stop running. To trust that she deserved love and happiness despite what she had done. To believe Jack when he said she had done right and to build a life based on that belief. That was true bravery, choosing hope over fear, love over isolation, life over mere survival. And Jack's greatest gift to her was not his protection or his love, though both were precious. It was his unwavering belief in her worth, his refusal to see her as damaged or shameful, his insistence that she had every right to defend herself and every right to happiness afterward. He saw her not as a victim or a murderer, but as a survivor and a warrior, someone worthy of admiration rather than pity. Together, they proved that love could heal even the deepest wounds, that family could be built even from the most broken beginnings, and that redemption was always possible for those brave enough to reach for it. Their story ended as all stories must, with death and parting, but it ended well, with love affirmed, children and grandchildren surrounding them, and a legacy that would endure for generations. The Wild West, for all its harshness and danger, was also a place of possibility. Sarah Mitchell arrived in Redemption, Texas, in 1878, running from death and convinced her life was over. She left this world in 1905 as Sarah Donovan, surrounded by love, having lived a life richer and fuller than she had ever dreamed possible. And it all started with a confession, a moment of desperate honesty, and 4 simple words from a cowboy who would become her everything. "Then you did right." Those words were the foundation on which an entire life was built, a family was raised, and a legacy was created. They were words of grace and understanding, of judgment withheld and love offered freely. They were the words Sarah needed to hear to begin healing, and they were the truth, not legal truth perhaps, but moral truth. She had done right. She had survived. And she deserved every bit of happiness that followed. The story of Jack and Sarah Donovan, cowboy and survivor, husband and wife, partners in love and life, stands as testament to the enduring power of human connection, the possibility of redemption, and the courage it takes to choose love over fear. Their lives, lived fully and well in the wild heart of Texas, remind us that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with the simplest decisions: to tell the truth, to offer grace, to take a chance on love, and to build a future together, one day at a time, no matter what has come before. This is their story, complete and true, from desperate beginning to peaceful end, and it is a story worth remembering.